Far beyond the distant galaxies lay a world called Zhorin. It was no ordinary world. Here, the skies shimmered in three colors: blue, violet, and gold. At night, the stars glittered like scattered jewels, and the air carried the fragrance of blossoms as if thousands of spring roses bloomed together. In this world lived a sorcerer alien named Arlume. He was tall, his skin a luminous shade of green, and his eyes the deep blue of sapphires. He was unlike any other creature, for he could trap time in his palm, halt the winds, and bend light to his will. All of Zhorin's creatures feared and respected him, not just for his power, but for his sense of justice. Yet the most precious thing in his life was not his magic, but his wife, Seralina. She was so beautiful that it seemed as if moonlight had been given human form. Her long, shimmering hair caught the light like silver streams, and when she smiled, the entire valley seemed to bloom with fragrance. Their love was a legend in Zhorin, and everyone knew Arlume would give his life for her without hesitation. Arlume's powers were without limit. He could reduce a mountain to dust in an instant or condense an ocean into a single drop. But his greatest strength lay in a magical ring Seralina had given him on their wedding day. The ring held a blue gem that shimmered in the light, said to have been taken from the very heart of the cosmos. Through this ring, Arlume could amplify his magic and shield Seralina's life from harm. Seralina, too, was far from ordinary. She belonged to a rare lineage, capable of sensing light and energy itself. When danger approached, her heartbeat would quicken, warning Arlume before the threat arrived. This gift had saved them countless times. Their life was peaceful and filled with love, until fate's scroll revealed a different story. A long-forgotten enemy, once Arlume's own student, exiled for treachery, was about to return, driven by revenge. To the north of Zhorin lay a valley where darkness reigned even in the light of day. This was where Morgas, Arlume's former apprentice, had been imprisoned. Once the most gifted of Arlume's students, Morgas had turned to dark magic in his hunger for power. He sought to conquer Zhorin, but Arlume had defeated him and sealed him in the Valley of Shadows. Centuries later, an earthquake shattered the prison walls, and Morgas was free once more. His eyes now burned like red embers, and his form was cloaked in swirls of shadow. His first goal was clear: destroy Arlume and Seralina, for he knew that while they lived, Zhorin could never be his. He began tunneling beneath the earth, sending forth monstrous shadow servants to attack villages. But Arlume and Seralina had yet to realize that these assaults were only pieces of a far greater plan. One evening, as the three suns set and painted the skies in gold, blue, and crimson, Arlume and Seralina stood on the palace balcony awaiting the stars. Suddenly, a shiver of dread swept through Seralina's heart. She closed her eyes and felt a deep, shifting darkness stirring beneath the earth. Arlume noticed the fear on her face. "What is it?" he asked. In a soft voice, she replied, "Something is coming. Something that hates the light." Just then, a distant explosion shook the mountains, and the ground trembled beneath them. Palace guards rushed in, reporting strange, shadowy creatures at the northern border, beings that dissolved into air only to reappear elsewhere. Arlume's eyes hardened. He knew this was no ordinary threat, but he reassured her, "As long as I'm here, nothing will happen to you." Little did he know those words would soon be tested. The next morning, Arlume summoned all palace guards, magical advisors, and representatives from nearby villages to the grand hall. In the center stood a glowing table with a map of Zhorin etched in shimmering light. Arlume explained that the shadow creatures came from a darkness-infused magic, capable of destruction unlike anything they had seen. Seralina listened silently from a corner, her eyes often fixed on Arlume, as if she knew the danger was even greater than he said. Arlume ordered the strengthening of the magical barrier around the palace. Tall columns were fitted with blue light stones, capable of storing pure light to repel darkness. But Arlume also knew Morgas was cunning. He would not attack in the open. He would strike in a way that would catch them off guard. Determined to learn more, Arlume decided to journey north himself. Seralina smiled faintly, but felt an unshakable unease in her heart. 2 days later, Arlume set out with 3 loyal companions toward the north. As they traveled, the weather changed. Clouds thickened until no sunlight could pass, and icy flakes floated in the air, though it was spring. Nearing the Valley of Shadows, the ground frost melted unnaturally, and a wall of fog rose before them. Arlume lifted his staff, and from its tip burst a blue flame that cut through the mist. Beyond lay a haunting sight, crumbling ruins, sunken pillars, and floating black specks that seemed to drain life from anything nearby. One of these specks began to take shape. It was Morgas's shadow messenger. In a voice like grinding stone, it spoke, "Arlume, my teacher, your days are numbered." Arlume's reply was firm. "Morgas, you still do not fear the light? Your end is near." The messenger laughed before vanishing into the fog, leaving Arlume certain the real battle had yet to begin. Meanwhile, at the palace, Seralina's dreams turned strange. Every night she saw the same vision. A dark valley, Arlume standing alone, surrounded by thousands of shadow creatures. She would call to him, but her voice never reached. One night another face appeared, Morgas, his eyes blazing red flames. In a low, venomous voice, he said, "Your beauty, your power, they will be mine." Seralina awoke with a start, only to hear a soft knock at her window. When she approached, no one was there. Only a single black feather on the floor, radiating cold and fear. She knew then that Morgas's gaze was fixed not only on Arlume, but on her as well. That moment, she decided she would not remain in the palace. She would be part of this fight, whether Arlume agreed or not. A few days later, Arlume returned, but worry lined his face. He told Seralina that Morgas had woven a barrier of darkness around the valley, one no ordinary sorcerer could enter. Only someone who could command both light and shadow could pass. Without hesitation, Seralina said, "Then we must both go." Arlume's reaction was sharp. "No, it's too dangerous for you." But she looked into his eyes and answered, "I am not just your wife, I am your partner. If this fight is ours, I will not stay behind." At last Arlume yielded, and they began preparations. That very night, the blue stones protecting the palace suddenly went dark, and shadow creatures appeared on the walls. This was Morgas's first direct strike, and Arlume knew that if it wasn't stopped before dawn, the palace would be nothing but ruin. It was the last watch of the night. The valley around Zhorin's palace was silent until the ground began to quake as if some giant walked beneath it. Out of the mist emerged thousands of shadows, their eyes glowing like coals. They were not human. Their forms were made of smoke. But in their hands they carried black iron weapons that absorbed light. The blue stones on the palace walls dimmed as though their light was being devoured. Arlume climbed the tallest tower and raised his staff skyward. A ring of blue light spread around the palace. But the creatures pressed on, cutting through it. Seralina joined him on the wall, armed with a golden bow, an heirloom from her ancestors. Her arrows of light dissolved enemies on contact, but their numbers seemed endless, a storm without end. Arlume knew this was only the beginning. Morgas himself had yet to appear. The heaviest attack came at the main gates. A 20-foot shadow giant appeared, its voice a mix of thunder and frost. With a single strike, it shattered the massive doors. Arlume quickly wove a shield of light around himself and Seralina before leaping down to the battlefield. His strike unleashed a wave of blue flame, erasing dozens of foes. Seralina was no less fierce. One arrow split into 3 mid-flight, each finding its target. But dark magic held a sinister secret. Every fallen shadow split into 2 more upon hitting the ground. The battlefield became a chaotic swirl of burning light and boiling darkness. Suddenly, Arlume sensed someone behind him. Turning, he found Morgas standing there, a cruel smile on his lips. "Teacher," Morgas said mockingly, "so many years, and you're still a prisoner of the light." Arlume gripped his staff tighter. "And you're still a slave to darkness." Words became sparks as they clashed, magical energy erupting between them. Morgas raised his hand to the sky, calling down a black bolt of lightning that consumed light wherever it struck. Arlume spun his staff, forming a golden shield to block it. Seralina seized the moment, firing an arrow at Morgas, but it turned to smoke before reaching him. Morgas laughed. "Do you think I would spare your little wife?" With a flick of his hand, a shadowy chain snaked toward her, binding her feet. Arlume blasted it apart with blue flame, but knew Morgas's true plan was yet to be revealed. In the midst of battle, a massive explosion rocked the far side of the palace. Morgas's elite followers had reached a hidden gate and were dismantling the magical defenses from within. Arlume faced a choice: Keep fighting Morgas or rush to save the palace. At that moment, Seralina spoke. Leave him to me. Save the palace. Arlume looked at her in surprise, but her eyes carried the fierce light of a born warrior. Reluctantly, he nodded and ran toward the breach. Seralina struck her bow against the ground, forming a golden halo around herself. Morgas smirked. Interesting. Let's see how long you last. They stood face to face, the heir of light and the king of darkness. Seralina readied her most powerful arrow, one that could only be fired once, holding the light of her entire bloodline. As she drew, a golden circle of light formed in the air, freezing every shadow for a heartbeat. Morgas summoned a massive dark cloud to block it. Their powers clashed, shaking the castle walls and splitting the ground. Seralina released the arrow. It tore through the dark cloud and struck Morgas's staff, shattering it. Morgas staggered back with a scream, but his magic still lingered, and he prepared for one last strike. At that moment, Arlume returned, wounded but alive. Seeing Seralina standing alone before Morgas filled him with fury. He struck his staff to the ground, sending a wave of blue flame across the field, turning night into day. Morgas retreated but smiled. You've won, for today, he said before vanishing into smoke. Arlume rushed to Seralina and held her close. The battle ended, but Zhorin bore deep scars. Villages lay in ruins, light stones shattered, and the palace walls cracked. Seralina had paid the greatest price. In firing that arrow, she lost part of her inner light forever. Her hair dimmed, her eyes held a trace of exhaustion. Arlume vowed, You saved my world. I will go to the ends of the universe to restore your light. She smiled. You are my light. As long as you are here, I am whole. Months passed, and the land slowly healed. On a morning when all three suns rose together, Arlume and Seralina held a ceremony, installing stronger lightstones across the realm. But they knew Morgas was still out there, plotting his return. Standing hand in hand, they looked to the sky. A red glint flashed briefly above. Maybe it was Morgas's eye, or a new threat. But this time they were ready. For when light and love stand together, darkness always falls back.